everyone, welcome to another episode of Equip and Elevate. We're so excited for the year ahead. This is going to be an exciting year, but to get started with this series, we are focusing on businesses. We're focusing on women that have done phenomenal things in this space. I'm particularly excited about today's episode because I have Mogau in the building. I mean, we've been trying to get her for some time now. I've particularly admired her journey in founding the Lazy Makoti. I think for the longest time, I just thought her name was the Lazy Makoti. And for me, that's testament of the brand that she has built. If you don't know anything about the Lazy Makoti is a platform that seeks to celebrate food and bring people together and also create memorable experiences. She is also a trained chef and an award-winning cookbook author. So I'm really excited to get into today's conversation, and welcome to Equip and Elevate.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here.
I'm so happy that we're finally doing this. I think last time we were trying to do it and my pregnancy life was like saying no. It was really very difficult to find a time, but I'm really excited that you're here. And I'm excited for people that are either establishing their businesses or trying to navigate out of corporate to go into entrepreneurship, and really hearing some insight on how you did that and how they can practically apply that for their specific journeys. Yeah. To get started, can you maybe just share some of the core values that have been instrumental in shaping who you are today? You can go back to your upbringing. Who were you at 7? And how did that also impact the person you are today?
Sure. So when I think about the core values that really influence the person that I am today, I guess I'd have to say mostly Christian values, because I did grow up in a very Christian home, an extremely Christian home, very strict. Grew up in the church, my dad being a pastor of a church, my mom's a teacher, and yeah, I think those are the first really core values that I grew up with. And then growing up in Limpopo, I think one of the biggest values is that of respect, of, I guess, ubuntu, which is just respect for oneself, but for the people around you more than anything.
Yeah. And how were you, like, the type of person when you were 7? Were you always soft-spoken? Because you're very soft-spoken and, like, you giggle, and I'm always like, I sound like the loud one, and generally I'm the soft-spoken person in the room.
Well, funny enough, not everybody describes me that way.
Really?
A lot of people say I'm very strict. I'm a little strict, so. But yeah, I've always been, I guess, soft-spoken, like you're saying. I don't want to say that quiet, because I really wasn't. But yeah, soft-spoken. I kept to myself. I read a lot. Grew up in an extremely strict home, so I think a lot of that was influenced by that.
Yeah, and how did that shape the person you are today?
My one friend calls me Mrs. Boundaries.
I love that.
And I guess, that's the kind of person I am. I believe in structure. I like for things to make sense. I want to know what's the plan. I am not a go with the flow kind of girl. Like, I want to know, do we have a plan? Is there a map? Show it to me. Does it make sense to me? Do I believe in it? And then let's go.
Sure, and I think that's what I got from you. Like, and I think the second time around, like last year, we were trying to schedule, was quite crazy. The second time around, I'm like, shucks, I better know my story. I'm like, this is the time, this is where shooting, this is the topic. And then when you would respond, I'm like, I have to do 2 days turnaround time because it was like this. But not from a strict perspective. I really respected how you run your business and how you run everything. It's not just like, freestyle, but you're very intentional about how you coordinate things. And I think for me, I wanted to honor that. That's why I wanted to make sure that in me engaging with you, trying to make an appointment or trying to find a time, this time around I have no excuse but to make sure that I honor you. So I think that was evident in just me engaging with you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that. I think that's what entrepreneurship does to you. I've been doing this for almost 10 years now. And you kind of have to be that person because at some point you are everything in the business. So you need time management is just everything.
Yeah.
It's just everything.
By the way, she's like 25 minutes early. I was just like, I'm like, what are we going to do?
I'm sorry. sorry.
No, but it is really amazing.
I'm that person.
I'm like, I'm calling Dio has in a meeting. I'm like, where are you? She is here. She is here. So I think that's really great to even just experience that. So over the course of your journey, how have you defined your sense of purpose, and how has that evolved?
My sense of purpose, I think when I started the Lazy Makoti, I'd been working in corporate, and a friend of mine asked that I mean, I've told the story 1,000 times, but a friend asked that I give her cooking lessons, and she specifically wanted to learn to make, traditional South African food.
Yeah.
And this was because she couldn't find, a book, cooking school, or any, other means for her to learn.
Yeah.
She was going to get married. She wanted to impress her in-laws, a very familiar story.
Yeah.
And so that's why she enlisted my help.
Yeah.
And then from that, I guess the dots sort of connected, because it's funny how all of these things happened around the same time. I got this boss who I just hated.
Yeah.
So I was very unhappy at work. And then I had this friend ask me to do this thing for her. And then I remember stumbling across, it's called the UN's list of intangible aspects of humanity in need of urgent safeguarding. So at the time, this was a list of literature and art and music and of course food, things that are considered important for humanity's history, for humanity's, just for who we are. And most importantly, considered important for us to safeguard them. And the only food on this list was, I think it was Japanese, French, and Italian food. So in essence, the whole world is galvanizing to safeguard these foods so that they are still there, so that future generations can still have a pasta and a sushi.
Yeah.
But nobody's putting that kind of energy into our food.
Yeah.
And I think all those dots sort of connected, where I had this light bulb moment that, who is teaching and, preserving us that way in our food. Yeah.
So would you define that as your sense of purpose, to basically, I wouldn't say archive, but really collect information, which is Black information, which is food, obviously, in this instance. I mean, I'm thinking of a library, I know that Thabo Mbeki Foundation is doing something that I think we should have done years ago, where they're actually trying to document African history, because there's not a lot of African history, and building a library around that. So when I think about you were saying, you're actually trying to create sort of I wouldn't say stories, but information or data. Data is probably the best. Data for future generations to have access to that.
And it's the thing that's, I'll say funny, for lack of a better word, about the situation, the unique situation that we are in, particularly as Black people, as Africans, as Black Africans, is that we are creating while we're trying to archive. So there's a lot that other sort of nations have had the chance to do. French food evolved from just very simple food, and they've been able to elevate it, etc., to what it is right now, where it's $1 million industry.
Yeah.
So we haven't necessarily had that chance to do that with our food, but at the same time we recognize a need to go back and document what was, but at the same time create, because culture is ever changing.
Yeah.
And so I always say to my friend, I'm as African as Shaka Zulu was.
Yeah.
So it is important to document the food that he ate, as it is to document the food that I'm eating now. So it's a peculiar place to be as a young African, but the work has to be done.
No, it's exciting stuff. And I think since maybe I've only known you for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think since you have come into the scene, and I know there's been other incredible chefs that have done very similar work, but I feel like there's a movement of other women, other chefs that are doing African food, traditional food, and I don't know where it comes from. I wouldn't say I feel like you inspired that movement too. You were part of the people that inspired that movement. But to be honest, there's been such a shift in terms of also the kind of food that's being put out there by other, I don't want to say chef, because some of them are not chefs, but they just enjoy cooking. Creating books, and there's been a lot of that. And I think you've seen that in the last 5 years. So I want to go back to your corporate journey. Take us back to what made you get into that, and what were some of the defining moments that really captured that part of your life?
I think, this thing that, well, my generation of girl has always heard is that, there are things that the smart girls study.
Yeah.
Ended up at the University of Pretoria, and then became an auditor, worked for one of the big firms. And I think I see how there are little moments where I knew this isn't necessarily what it is that I wanted to do. But then you always think you're too far ahead.
Yeah.
No, I've started this degree.
Yeah.
No, now I'm actually working. No, when now in hindsight I recognize that it's never too late.
Yeah.
At any point you can leave whatever you had committed to find another thing that speaks to that chapter of your life.
Yeah. I think I was having a conversation with a friend. I think she's in a very similar position, and I'm like, there are people who in their late 40s are starting medicine, and imagine that's 6 years of going back to school. They're only going to start practicing in their 50s, and for them just getting 10 years of working as a doctor is worth starting over again. And I think that's something that we also need to get into. But for you, what was that moment of like, shucks, I can't do this, I want to leave this space and then focus on other things?
I think the penny dropped for many Sundays when I would think, tomorrow I have to go to work. I remember that feeling so well, of like, I can't believe it, almost like the suffocating feeling. I can't believe tomorrow I have to go there. And then while I was starting the Lazy Makoti, recognizing the very different feeling I was feeling whenever I was giving cooking lessons and I was cooking and I was talking about food, and how it was just worlds apart, like just so different, and kind of knowing that I have to take that leap of faith. I think it's important to mention that things won't be perfect when you do it. And I don't necessarily, I said I'm the girl with the plan, but I don't necessarily think you must wait for things to be perfect, because you'll never have enough time, you'll never have enough money, you'll never have an abundance of like resource. Sometimes you just have to make that decision and make it work. Make it work.
And what would be some steps that you would like give, or some practical tips you'd give when someone is in a very similar position? Like, I know some people say you must have an exit plan. You must have savings for 6 to 8 months to a year in case your whatever you want to do doesn't work out. You can sustain yourself for that period of time. What tips would you give someone that's in a very similar position where they're like, shucks, I want to exit. I've got this idea, this passion of mine, or this, project I'm working on. I really want to build this into a business. What would you say they should maybe think about? Maybe 3 things. I know there's a lot of things that you could maybe, speak about, but maybe 3 things that you would advise.
I think number 1 is recognizing how lucky you are to be in that position.
Sure. That's a good one.
We don't talk about it enough.
Yo, that's a good one.
There really is no such thing as like, a wrong move. Every detour is just on that path to where you should be. I'm very grateful for all the lessons that I got working in corporate, for the person that I became working in corporate. I think a lot of it, I see it in my business, how much I have benefited from, those learnings. So recognize how lucky you are to even start from that place of such privilege.
That's so good.
All the people that you meet while you're working in corporate, the contacts that you make, the resources that are available to you, use that and understand that is a great stepping stone. And then, of course, you do have to prepare. I think I was lucky that at the time I didn't really have like big bills. I didn't have a bond or things like that I was letting go of. So that makes it a lot easier. I can imagine if I had children and a bond to think about, I don't know if I would have been able to make those same decisions. So obviously preparing for that time when you do exit. And then for a while, do both things. I think that's a great way to really kind of make sure that this feeling in your gut is real. Doing both things, because it does have to make money, unfortunately. Unfortunately. It does have to make sense, particularly if you have very real bills, very real things to take care of in your life. We don't have that kind of privilege to just like make that leap and not think about it. So I think in as you prepare, things like downsizing, if you drive your dream car, you maybe have to let it go for a much smaller, more affordable one in order to fund this dream of yours. But I think the one other way, we are so lucky. I mean, what a privilege to live in South Africa, hey?
Yeah.
There are so many incubators and programs like that exist to help you. That's how I put myself through culinary school. I went through this incubation with SAB Kickstart, and I won, I think it was around 200,000 Rand, and I was able to put myself through school. I didn't get into debt. So essentially, I could start the Lazy Makoti like debt-free.
Yeah. I think I also always say that I think even as a new business, if you're trying to raise capital, a really great way of doing it is also entering competitions, and because that way it's more than anything, it's not, you don't need to pay it back. The only thing you'll need to pay back is your time to do reports on how you're doing for the year. But I think that's another great way for anyone that's like looking to start a business or is trying to raise capital for their business or funding. I wanted to go back to something you said. You mentioned that there were some lessons you learned in corporate that you've applied in your business right now. What are some of those lessons? Maybe someone who is sort of navigating that space and saying, sure, I don't know, I'm stuck. I don't know how to bring these lessons back into my business. Or maybe I've never worked in corporate, but I'm just like trying to build and make my business better. What are some of those lessons?
I think early on, it was definitely lessons around structure, that you can't just wing it. Lessons around credibility. If I'm going to be asking people to give me their money, they're not just going to give me money because I love cooking. So the first step for me was to go to culinary school. That was so important for me, that I have credibility because I'm brand new in this sort of industry, and also to pay respect. I remember attending some sort of workshop, and there were chefs there, and we were all talking about food, and just thinking, the audacity to be talking to these people who've invested their lives into this thing, and I have nothing to back it up. So it was really important for me, if I'm going to be asking people to give me their resource, which is money, I need to also invest in this craft. And then, like I said, structure. I remember when I started, I would come to your house and we would do this cooking lesson, and then we'd get carried away, and before you know it, it's like 4 hours have passed, but I'm only charging you for 2. And just recognizing that like there definitely has to be structure, and as much as a lot of my business is social, but it has to make sense. This business has to make money and pay the bills.
I remember someone once said it. I mean, she's very controversial, but I really love her. She said, passion does not pay your bills. So I think it's always good to align your passion and saying, how can I still make this, monetize from this passion, or if I want to pursue this fully. So I think that's another thing that people are trying to carve out, to say, I have this passion, I want to focus on this, but how do I build this into a business, and making more than anything, am I making money? What's my turnover? So I want to go back to the early stages of, setting up your business. Obviously, entrepreneurship comes with challenges. What were some of the hurdles that you experienced, and what did you do to put in place in order to overcome those hurdles? What are some of the strategies you did to overcome those hurdles?
I think initial hurdles will be imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of us experience, wondering if you have enough to be able to pursue this thing, knowing you don't have enough in terms of experience, maybe even network, resources, and whether or not this can work. At the time, I didn't necessarily have a blueprint, so I didn't have anything to follow. So I was sort of making it up as I was going, actually. So that is sort of the initial challenges. And then as you grow, challenges of, I think more than anything, imposter syndrome, I've realized. So many other things you can solve by, getting the right people to help you. More than anything, I think imposter syndrome, which is quite not ridiculous. I don't want to downplay those feelings. But I think all of that can be drowned by if you just keep going. And as you keep working, striving, what you are doing is building evidence for yourself. So when that imposter syndrome sort of creeps in, you do have evidence of when you did have a hurdle and you overcame it. So there is evidence to prove that you actually can do it.
And I think that's, for me, it is one of the things I struggled with when I first started working. And I think for me, it was just this feeling of unworthiness more than anything. Because when I started, I was just working for a big firm. I did law, and they tell you that a lot of people applied for this role. So already you feel you're like, I'm so lucky to be here, And I think it's something that can really stop you from doing well. And I think the minute you overcome it, there's so much freedom in how you carry yourself. You're able to walk into a room and you have confidence because you believe that, listen, I am meant to be in this space. I'm not lucky to be in this space. And that is evident in your work because you're confident. Now when you're trying to do work, when you have imposter syndrome, you're doubting every single thing. You're like, no, maybe it doesn't make sense. Maybe I should have asked this person. Maybe everything becomes a maybe because you don't think you are worthy of. For me, I didn't think I was worthy of being in that space.
And I think another thing I didn't mention that I learned in corporate was the power of your network. I think people think of network as, the C-suite, people who have already achieved. But even your peers, even everyone that you meet has a potential of being part of your network. So I'm remembering early on someone asking, who does your PR? How come you always get such good PR? Who does? And I'm like, nobody actually does. I'll get the call from someone I interacted with when they were an intern at this place, and apparently I was nice to them, and now they're the station manager at this place, and if I need anything, just to give them a call. And I think that is so important. I think the power of kindness, the power of buto, of just seeing people even when they are beneath you or whatever, but just treating people with respect, whoever they are. That for me is the single thing that has paid it forward a million, 1,000, a bajillion times. I can't tell you how many times I've had someone call me and tell me, I am this now. And I remember you from 20 something, and you were so nice to me. So I want to know, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't remember you, but okay, thank you.
That's amazing.
So I don't think we speak enough about that. I think on your way to achieving, it's so easy to feel like you have arrived, to forget that you were once a person struggling. And even outside of that, just treat people with respect.
And it's so crazy because that's a core value you were saying that really came from in how you were raised and how that is also influencing your character. It is important, and I think that's how we grow and build as people and build our businesses. It's really around the people around us. And I think someone said your net worth is your network is your net worth or something like that. I was just like, that's actually true, because the people that you interact with, people that you know around you, are those very same people that will say your name in a room full of opportunities. And I've had that. I've been and I remember I had a post when I said thank you to every person that has said my name in a room full of opportunities, because there's been moments when I was just the only way I was able to be considered, just be considered, is because someone felt I was worthy enough to be mentioned in that room. And then what does that do? It provides opportunities and for me. So I think that's very important. So I want to go back into looking at your business and how you've built your business and some of the lessons you've learned. What are some of the 3 top lessons you've learned in building your business?
Number 1 is that relationships, I think a lot of times when we think relationships, I guess particularly mentorship, we think of someone that is a CEO or someone that's really made a mark. But mentorship also happens with our peers. You know, someone that has a skill that you maybe don't, someone who's exactly where you are, understands your pain points, understands the boat that you're in, is many times able to teach, able to open a door. Yeah, you may not see the great opportunity that exists there. I think it's Issa Rae that talks about it, that we always want to network this way when there's so much that we can do this way.
I love that.
And then another key learning is just always to have a bigger picture, to always somehow know that there's so much bigger out there. You won't always see it in this moment, but this door opens into this door, opens into this door. I always say when I started the Lazy Makoti, all I knew was that I love cooking, I'm passionate about food, but I could never have imagined that I would one day have a best-selling cookbook and have a range in a retailer. Those aren't things I could have seen. So I can only imagine what the next 10 years will look like.
Hi guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, the episode does not end here. So make sure you go on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and also Google Podcasts to check out the full episode and be inspired, learn so much more, and learn more from our guests today. I hope you stay equipped and elevated. Love from Ayanda.